Hello friends, it's Casey. Welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be making a spread in my journal. This is a little art journal that I made out of a box of Pocky. And I just put a whole bunch of different papers in it. And one day I'll make a video on how I make my journals. And this particular spread has an old book page and a piece of scrapbooking paper. And that's my color palette that I'm going to be using. So I'm going to start with some golden fluid acrylics. You can use any kind of acrylics you like. I happen to like the golden fluid just because I like how much it spreads. It's really easy to work with. I do have heavy body acrylics as well, but I like to work with the fluid acrylics a lot better. So I'm speeding up the video just a little bit because it takes a while to make these spreads and nobody wants to sit here for an hour and watch me mix paint or whatever. So I'm mixing my colors. I don't particularly like to mix colors, but I work on it. I try to get as exact as I can, but honestly my motto is good enough. So I've just about got my brown where I need it. And yep, good enough. So now I'm going to take a baby wipe and apply it. Normally I gesso my pages before I put paint on them, but in this case I didn't because I really wanted the pattern, sorry, I'm still getting over COVID. I really wanted the pattern to show through. And when you apply the paint with a baby wipe, it's a little more transparent so you can see the background, and it's a lot easier to blend the colors because baby wipes have a little bit of oil in them. Acrylics can be really tough to blend, and I don't particularly like using water to blend because it waters down the color. But it's pretty easy to do with the baby wipe. So I've got my color and now I'm just kind of blending those two together. Blend, 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 blend. Okay, so now I have my background. And yes, I'm cleaning my palette. I like to have my stuff clean. I don't like leaving paint to dry on stuff, so it's not exciting to watch, but it's one of those things I just have to do. So now I'm deciding what I want to do for my background. I did not plan this out before I started. I generally don't. I'm looking at my colors. That's where I get my inspiration from. Trying to pick colors that match, but my acrylic paint markers don't really match very well. So I'm looking for one of my Posca pens. I have two sets of acrylic markers. I have Posca and then I have the other set that you just saw. I got them off of Amazon. They're not really branded. It just says acrylic paint marker on it. They're from somewhere in China. And honestly, I really like them. I'm just making some marks. When I don't know what to do, sometimes I'll just start making marks. And I tend to do this really slowly and just kind of letting my mind wander and let things go. And I find that ideas will come to me more easily that way. My other acrylic paint markers, going back to that subject, they are very fine tipped, and so I can get a lot of detail with them, and I like them a lot. And I like the color range in them too. The only thing I don't like with acrylic paint markers is I can never find dark enough browns. The darkest brown I ever get is a mid-tone, and that's a little frustrating. And now I've got all my marks made. Looking at my colors again, I decided to cut out some flowers. These are from a flyer at the library where I used to work, advertising some program, probably a children's program. and I liked the graphics that were on the paper, so I cut those out. And again, I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me cut them out, so I cut out the flowers that I wanted, and now I'm gluing them on the page. I just use Elmer's glue, which is also called PVA glue. I do tend to use a lot of glue when I glue things because I really like it to stick. And I'd rather have too much glue than too little. It's easiest when doing flowers to do the main part of the flower first, and then glue the little pieces like the stems. So that way you're not trying to get it on the page without wrinkling it, and it's just easier that way. Here I decided I wanted to put something on there that was glued down rather than draw on the page. So this is a piece of watercolor paper. And I'm making the approximate size that I want. I'm so sorry. COVID was no fun. So I decided I didn't want straight edges. So I'm going to cut this into an oval shape, and I just kind of eyeballed it. You can use a compass or whatever. You can trace something if you aren't comfortable just freehanding it, but honestly, I like to eyeball things a lot. I know it's not perfect, but to me that's part of the charm that says, hey, this is handmade and not, you know, AI or whatever. I decided to draw a dragonfly. And drawing is not something that I particularly like to do. I like to have drawings in my work, but I don't like the process of drawing. Filling in is good for me. Outlining is a little frustrating because I don't draw evenly, and you will see me erase a lot, even though it's just a simple dragonfly, because I have to have it perfect, I have to have it even. It's something I'm trying to let go of a little bit more, but not at this particular point. I decided that was all right. I like the dragonfly where it is, fixing the wing. And now I'm going to add some color. I'm going to start with the background. And I decided to do watercolor, first of all, because it's watercolor paper and because I wanted a softer background. So I'm using one of my brush pens. And this is the kind of brush pen where you can fill it with water, so you don't have to keep dipping it in water, but I never use it like that. I've tried using it like that, and I really can't get the control for the amount of water I want that way, and it becomes a big mess, and I just don't like it. So I have a mug that I fill with water, and I just use it as a regular brush. Now I don't have pink, and I wanted to do pink for the background, so I watered down a red a lot. And I'm trying to get more of a pink tone. But it had to be so light in order for it to be pink instead of red that it really didn't show up very well at all. So here I had the genius idea of using my watercolor markers. And there they are. I have all kinds of pinks in my watercolor markers. So I'm going to add more pink to the background. And since the paper's already wet, it blends really well. I'm still going to use my brush and help it blend out farther. I don't know if you can hear this in the background. My robot vacuum is making its rounds, and I've shut myself in a bedroom to try to have a quiet background, but it's bothering me. It says, "Mom, let me in." No, you've already come in here. Go somewhere else. All right, now I've got the background the way I like it. And I'm going to color the dragonfly. I start with a little bit of turquoise, just for some highlights. And then using some black. Sometimes I really have no idea what to draw when I do these art journals, particularly with this color palette. Dragonflies I tend to think of as more turquoise and green, maybe a little bit of yellow, so I normally wouldn't think about putting a dragonfly in this particular color scheme, but for whatever reason that's what came to me, so that's what I decided to draw. When I did the tail, I got into the part that was still damp, so the end of the tail bled out a little bit. And I'll show you how I fix that later. These are glitter pens, which I got off of Amazon. Most of my art supplies I just get off Amazon or Blick. And I'm doing some silver glitter pen in the wings to give them a little bit of sparkle and shine, because who doesn't like sparkle and shine? Now here I decided to add a little bit of pink into the wings to blend, not really blend it into the background, but carry some of the background color into the wings. You hopefully can see the glitter. I was about to glue it and I thought, it's not quite done yet. I decided I wanted to have something around the edge of this, so it's like its own little vignette. So I'm going to take my dark pink and my watercolor brush marker and just go around the edge. Almost make it like a little photograph. That's the neat thing about art, is you can really do whatever you want, whatever pops into your head. If you don't like it, then just do something else. I just finished a spread where I had a spread done and I hated it and I kept trying to fix it and I couldn't fix it, so finally I just gessoed over the whole thing and redid it, and now I like it a lot. I'm glad I didn't give up on it and I tried again and made it into something I liked. Now I'm going to put a stamp on the bottom under the dragonfly. I'm using distress ink because that's what I have. I don't particularly like distress ink. It's water soluble and it never completely dries. And you can see I got the top part of the stamp on there, and I'll show you how to fix that too. I started by using a little bit of water and fading it out as much as I could. But the distress ink obviously is water soluble because you can lift it off the page, and it smears, and I tend to want to stamp and then keep working, and I end up smearing my stamps all the time. So one of these days when I get back to Michael's, I'm gonna buy a bunch of archival inks to use instead. I like the archival a lot better than the distress ink, and that's just my personal preference. I know a lot of people love the distress inks and they use them a lot. But for the way that I work, it's a little frustrating for me. So I'm taking a little bit of white fluid acrylic paint, and I am going to go over that spot and just blend it as much as I can. And the good thing is I did not extend the pink up into that area, so I don't have to redo the background. And you just do a bunch of thin layers, and it covers it right up. And since I'm there, I'm going to touch up the tail too, where it bled, and cover that up. Acrylic paint is so handy. And now I'm getting out my acrylic markers again, and I'm going to add a stem to the rose. And I'm going to go off the little vignette onto the page, and that kind of anchors it down into the work so it's not just floating on top of the background. For whatever reason, the stamp I have has some leaves coming out of the rose, but it's the same color as the rose because I stamped it all in the same color. So I'm going over with my acrylic paint marker and coloring the leaves the color they should be. And because the only color I had in ink was red, I decided that I want to go over the rose with pink and make it more pink like the rest of the flowers, so I will do that shortly after I finish highlighting the leaves. It's always nice with stamps to be able to add extra colors into it so it's not all one flat color. It makes it look less like a stamp then. I have to shake these markers a lot. I'm not going to make you watch me fill the entire thing in, but I do go over with the markers in several different pinks. And because the Distress ink has a tendency to smear, I do like to go over it with acrylics, and that way it makes it permanent. Again, once I get archival inks, I won't have this problem. Just finishing highlights in the rose. Now I have to decide what I'm going to say in my journal spread, and sometimes that's the hardest part of doing a spread, is figuring out what words to put on it. I could always not put words on it if I want to, but I really like having the words on it. So again, I decided to do an oval because I don't want those sharp edges. And I also don't want it completely white because that will stand out too much from the rest of the page. So this is a book that I got from the library. The library has not really a continuous book sale going on. They kind of have a continuous book sale going on, but we're always taking donations, and so we always have a big pile of books that either are for sale currently or will be for sale at the next book sale. And so since I worked there, I got to see all of the books. And this is a book, I think this is called The Simple Life. But it has all sorts of chapter headings and things that have neat words on it that I'd like to use. So I use this book a lot. I have another book, and I can't remember what it's called right now. I use a lot of words out of that book too. Sometimes I'll cut words out of books, sometimes I will stamp them with letters, sometimes I'll just handwrite them. This one had the perfect space for text from the book, so. Now I'm going to take my watercolor markers again, if I can find the right color. I have so many colors. And I'm going to do the background just like I did for the dragonfly. It's good to look at your piece as a whole and see if there's anything that stands out too much or something that interrupts the flow of the piece. And outlining again. All in all, this piece took about an hour to make. I did have to stop recording in the middle because I got up to get something and knocked over my tripod. So I had to stop and restart all over again. And glue. I do have Mod Podge. I use Mod Podge for things like tissue paper and other things that are really delicate. I also have fabric glue for if I'm working with fabrics or something that really needs heavy duty adhesive, but typically I just use Elmer's glue. It's pretty good all-purpose. I'm going to take my Stabilo pencil and I'm going to shade underneath some of these things. When you do drop shadows, it makes your objects kind of pop off the page. And I'm not going to make you watch me do all of this, but I go around with my Stabilo pencil and then I take my water brush and just using plain water, I go over the Stabilo pencil, which the Stabilo pencil is kind of like a really saturated watercolor pencil. So it does smear the marks and you can blend it nicely. So I went around all the flowers and I also went around the dragonfly vignette. I don't outline them completely, just in spots. And that's the finished product. Thanks for joining me.